Hello. Welcome, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about building community in Web3. And I am joined by Anna, who works with me at the Celo Foundation. I'm Josh. I do dev role at the Celo Foundation. Anna helps build community at the Celo Foundation. We're with Evan, who is CEO at Ubeswap, and Chaim from Nomspace. So to start, I just want to do some intros because I think it will help set some context and get some background on how we all got here. So Anna, you can start.
I'm so excited. Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And this is a fireside chat, so I think this is going to be a more intimate space. So please, if anyone wants to move closer, ask questions, don't be shy. We would love for this space to be open to community. I love this question because I love answering and I love hearing other people's answers about this because I think it sets the stage for how we all ended up here. And my story truly begins and ends with community. And I have a really distinct memory, even super early on when I was still in high school. We had this career development workshop. And they asked us all to put like on the little post-it, like, what do you want to be when you grow up kind of thing. And everyone wrote like very typical answers, had very clear, straight career path, knew exactly what they wanted to do. And I wrote down, the job I will have does not exist yet. And I don't think it's because I was like particularly a visionary, but I think it's because I was curious and optimistic and hopeful in what I was seeing in, particularly in what Web2 technologies were doing. And like career as a social media manager didn't exist yet because like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all these platforms were coming up and they were talking about like how they were gonna create job and opportunities for content to create content and monetize their content. There were going to be all these jobs available for people to manage this content and to like create an entire ecosystem. So like I was kind of hopeful and optimistic that there were going to be of what technology could do for work in Web 2. But what I didn't know was that years later I was going to come across Web 3 and Web 3 communities where they were truly changing the nature of work and the nature of community and the nature of ownership in ecosystems. So I came across, I did start in community management in a more Web 2 traditional sense, and that job was extremely fulfilling and fun, and it allowed me to travel and meet a lot of people across the world, and I started attending meetups, and that's how I think a lot of us ended up in Web3. Is I started going to meetups, and I was like, what is this Web3 thing, and why is everyone talking about community and peer-to-peer sharing and value? And I started participating in communities and doing like work through grants programs, which is what I now do at the Celo Foundation, and through working in a community, I ended up getting hired to work for a different foundation doing grants and building community. And then through that work, I ended up here. So my work began with community, and then now being at the foundation, building community for the ecosystem. It's come full circle.
Nice. Evan.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm CEO of Node Group. We just released Node Wallet this week. It's in beta. I encourage you to check it out. It's an entirely new DeFi experience on Celo. And I also lead Ubeswap. I don't like to call myself a CEO of Ubeswap because it's a protocol. And ultimately, I'm kind of innovating myself out of a job. So by next year, hopefully it's just community run. And hold us to that. But community is very important, from that angle, because you have to educate users, empower them, and use the tools that you have at your disposal in Web 3 to do all that. Because I don't have a Web 2 marketing background at all, but I manage a lot of the Ubeswap and Node branding and communication and growth. So perhaps the fact that like I didn't do Web 2 marketing and I don't have social media personally or believe in Facebook ads or anything like that, I guess gives me a better platform for just thinking differently and a little bit more, whatever side of the brain is kind of the creative space. And before Celo, I was working at Terra, and I co-authored the Terra white paper. And that's kind of like a segue as to how I got into crypto, because I was doing economic policy and U.S. currency reserve management at the Federal Reserve for a while. And that's just kind of looking down at the earth at a 30,000-foot level. You pull one lever, you don't really engage with a community. But then crypto wave hit in 2017, and I just started to go to these meetups in New York. And it was just this whole different vibe, connecting with people who had new ideas. And there was these people working on a decentralized stablecoin in Korea. And then I flew out there and started working out there. And similar problem with all of these startups, and everyone here is, essentially you're starting something from nothing and trying to scale it up and build in a team and build with others and grow your community. It is all about community, because in Web 2, you see I'm not a Web 2 marketing expert, but it's generally seen as like the user is sort of something that you can pay to acquire. And that's not the case in Web 3. The user is someone that comes to you because they're inspired. And that's been my journey getting into crypto. And so that's kind of what I want to give back to everyone is, how can we build Ubeswap and Node, which is kind of like the retail adoption strategy for Ubeswap, in a way that really gets the whole community excited, and not only grows these products, but grows all the Celo ecosystem, grows all of DeFi on Celo, gets millions more users on Celo. So the vision needs to be much bigger. And so we just want to kind of be here for you and build with you. And that's my story.
Hello, does this work? I feel very cool wearing this. Hello, I'm Chaim. I run Nomspace with Brian. So I guess I come from the most traditional Web 2 background. I worked and still work at Xeno Media. We're a radio platform right now transitioning to Web 3. I started with 10,000 users, and now we're at 40 million listeners. 45,000 stations, every country, every station, every genre. You name it, we do it. For me, coming from a very traditional Web 2 marketing background, what I love to do is, when I say create community, it's more like create connections, right? And for me, community is just how do you scale up connection, right? Like, it's easy for me to be on the stage with 3 people and like have a great conversation, like make a stupid joke, like whatever. But how do you do that to 20,000 people, 50,000 people, 5 million people, right? And on the one hand, with Web3, it's a little bit easier when you have a token and you have ownership, because there's financial incentives to buy in. But then for NAM, we still haven't launched our token yet, so it's how do you create that community without the financial incentives? How do you create those connections without it just being, hey, when's the airdrop? Like, when's it going to moon? When's it going to do all those classic Web3 phrases which you see on Twitter nonstop? So I think the question about community, I guess this question, like what I like to do in my background is, how do you scale up interpersonal relationships? How do you scale up people speaking to each other, and not just you being the focal point, but really creating the community and just being a member of the community? And I think, I guess my background and the way I came to this is just being a part of different communities and being able to engage them and be able to create those connections between people to each other.
That's very relatable.
Yeah, I want to come back to that in a little bit, but first I'll share how I got into Web3. And thinking back on it, I think community was really, the way Web3 is approaching community was really instrumental in attracting me to it, because I studied environmental science in college, and then just went off and did completely different things for a number of years. But something that really stuck with me is the magnitude of these wicked problems we're facing, just in terms of environmental problems, economic problems, and it's not obvious. These solutions are not obvious. But I heard about Ethereum on a podcast in 2016. I'm like, oh, the world computer, it's a new coordination mechanism. And I was like, okay, there's something here. I'll start learning about it. And I actually saw a version of Sep's talk that he gave at the opening of this conference, the 5 features of money. He gave that talk at DevCon 5, and that really attracted me to Celo. I'm like, okay, this feels right. Like, this is the approach of how we solve these wicked problems, like bottom up, organic, community-driven approaches where we just like have new tools. We work together to find new solutions using this new technology we have. Like, we don't know what the answer is, but we build communities and we can kind of work together to solve these problems. So I didn't intentionally come in with like a community perspective or like thinking that. It attracted me here, but I just like learning new things, and I can communicate concepts to like these complex concepts for like developers to help them build new tools. So that's kind of how I found my niche here, doing developer relations. So it's been, yeah, I've like fallen into this community role. It's been a lot of fun because, to what Chaim was saying, how do we scale these communities and how do we actually like grow in a way that's effective and we actually find solutions? I think building strong personal relationships is actually how we grow communities. I focus on building strong connections within the community, and then that just energy will kind of spread through the communities, as opposed to like thinking about how do I build a mailing list that has 100,000 subscribers, which from my perspective, like that's kind of the approach of just like advertising, or like maybe the Web2 approach, or even just outside of Web2, just kind of having brand leaders that just attract individuals. This is very much more just like, hey, we invite you to our community, we'll build strong relationships, and kind of you can find your unique purpose, or if you know your unique purpose, just contribute in your own way. So, yeah. Let's see. So community is a very general term. We just refer to everybody that's here as like community members, but we're all very different and we all do very different things. So I'm just curious what you all think about what your communities look like, or what are participants in your communities doing, and yeah, how do you think about community and maybe just in your unique situation?
I could start. So for Ubeswap, it's one of the most widely used protocols on Celo. There's 55,000 wallet addresses, almost 14,000 token holders, 25,000 Twitter followers. These are big numbers for Celo, and they've grown quite a bit over the past 7 or 8 months. And initially, when I had the opportunity to leave C Labs and help run Ubeswap, there really wasn't much community. One of the founders had gone off to do some other, launch another successful blockchain project. And there was no branding outside of the purple potato, which we've kept. And so we really wanted to say, okay, like Celo is very nascent. There really weren't even any tokens on Celo outside of Ube and a few others. We wanted to kind of take the branding in an entirely new direction. Like how do we reach way outside of Celo and just try and organically attract a lot of other people in the DeFi space? So we just pivoted the branding completely so that it's more DeFi focused. You've seen the future flying cars and the moons and the apes and the lasers and the vaporwave and all that stuff, and it's worked well. And we really want to like kind of stay true to that as we grow, because that's what all the new users have become accustomed to. So it's kind of like well, first off, what is our identity from a branding perspective? But then also, it was, who are we as a user base, like a user collective, so to speak? Because now we have new users. Great, we can start to decentralize even more, and so we start to like then walk down that path more aggressively. And one real like catalyst for even how I think about Ubeswap, like again, me innovating myself out of a job and not running things by at some point next year, is when sushi came to Celo. That was about like 7 or 8 months ago. It was a very like, I would say, cleverly architected kind of like a like a liquidity grab on Celo, and all Celo DeFi just suffered quite a bit. And we were all like, oh crap, we're going to kind of maybe not exist in a few months. If you enter a token death spiral, your token price goes down, your yield farm rewards go down, people leave, liquidity leaves, then your token goes down further. There wasn't any kind of Olympus-style fork or protocol-owned liquidity at the time on Celo. And so 2 things happened. One, we started to think about how we can have a retail strategy to grow our market, that we have more control over our future, and that's the node. But also we really focused on double down on the Celo community, and focused on adding new features, running governance votes, being the first to list any Celo token. And so we work closely with Celo Camp. They're a great pipeline for new projects and new tokens, just to educate everyone on how easy it is to get liquidity for your project, and how Ubeswap is essentially here to serve you. So it's kind of like just basic customer service. Get the projects that are Celo native on Ubeswap, which Sushi never listed, and they also weren't mobile first. And then once their rewards dried up, they had no community on Celo. They really didn't bring many users. It was a lot of whales from Ethereum. The money went back, and Sushi's TVL just totally plummeted. There is also the optics, some of the optics stuff in the middle, so we got a little bit, you could say, lucky that, basically all their money went back to Ethereum, which was kind of a theory that we had initially, that if they don't have community on Celo and they're just kind of bringing yield mercenaries, they're going to go back to Ethereum. And that kind of kicked off some of these new work streams that we're launching at the platform level for Ubeswap, again, to just try and make it a kind of liquidity layer 1 for everyone. So there's limit orders, which we just launched, thanks to Brian and the team who built that. That allows for anyone, any institution, any retail user to place as big of an order as they could imagine. And the platform can now handle much larger trade sizes, which is a nice pairing for the swap market, which is the trade size limit is based on the pool liquidity. So now we can handle as much liquidity as can come to Celo, and that's great, because that can continue to exist for quite some time as more growth comes. And 2, now we want to think, okay, what's bottom up? How do we serve all the projects, all the tokens, all the talent protocols who are going to bring 200 new tokens to the ecosystem? And these are tokens that I have no knowledge about. So I don't want to be the bottleneck to vet and approve and try and help all these 200 or 10,000 projects get listed on Ubeswap. So what we're going to launch pretty soon is an import farms feature where anyone can create their own farm and add their own incentives, and then any user on Ubeswap can import these farms. So in theory there could be 10,000 more tokens, and they're all going to use Ubeswap because we're just providing that front end. And so that I think is really powerful. Celo needs that. It needs 10,000 more tokens. And that's going to empower all the people that are using these tokens and to build their own communities as well. And so these are some of the things that we've kind of designed into the platform to really be very Celo-focused, have a very sticky user base, and also add back a lot of value, because we've had some experience where if you don't have community, like some of these other platforms that came over from Ethereum and didn't build it organically, you're not going to last for very long, and you will be out-innovated by people that have much more loyal users. And so people can fork your code, but they can't fork a loyal user, and so that's what we all want to build for.
Yeah, I'm just going to riff on Evan for 2 minutes, which is that there's an example that, I don't know if you guys know who Benedict Evans is. He's a lot smarter than I am. but he talks a lot about how it used to be that you had like a marketing budget, and then you had your like customer support, and then you had your product, and you had all these different silos, right? And then all of a sudden, like Casper comes and they sell direct mattresses, and like the way they got them was free returns, right? So is a free return, is that a marketing, or is that a showroom, or is that right? Like no, it's just like one thing. You look at the product cohesively, right? And I feel like a lot of times people like, let's say like a hardcore engineer, not to throw you under the bus, but I'm throwing you under the bus, they'll look at the product side, they'll look at the product like, these are the features we need, right? Where it's like, no, the features need to tie directly into community, and community needs to tie into the features. And it's not like, it's not two different teams, it's one team, right? It's like, how is this product going to create more buy-in from the end user as much as it is a product that offers a service to the end user? And I think you need to think about it holistically. It's like, oh, bring you over your farm, right? So that's a great way for people to like feel more ownership of it, promote their product because it's their farm, right? Like there's a lot of little outcrops of community that could come out from this one product feature you're launching because it's a holistic view of it versus just the technical view of it. And I think that's a really important piece of this as well.
I love that. Yeah, just to add on to that, I think that's the key difference between Web 2 community and Web 3 community. When people talk about Web 2 community, what they really mean is probably an audience. You're probably building an audience that is, at the end of the day, your end user and your end consumer. But when we talk about community in Web 3, what we're really talking about is not people who are just end users who are using the protocol or who are building on the protocol. We're talking about people who are producers and who have ownership and who have a stake, and ultimately they're a stakeholder in the ecosystem. And so what I'm really interested in terms of creating community for the entire Celo ecosystem is how do we cultivate people that are engaged, that are educated, and that want to grow the community and that want to essentially have a stake in what happens in the ecosystem. So the way that I think about our community is it's not just end users, it's also founders that are building on top of Celo. It's people who are creating educational materials, who are onboarding people in different countries. And a huge program and a huge priority for me is creating these regional hubs in different countries, because I think of community as like, it's almost like a blockchain. It's like, it's nodes in different regions that are connected by one single thread and one mission, which is really strong at Celo. But it's executed locally, and it's executed on a peer-to-peer level. And so what I want to do is build community in a way that like we can give a grant to someone in a country to start a meetups program, and then that meetups program can incubate someone who like attends a meetup, learns about Celo, like goes to a hackathon, and then ends up building a project on Celo. And those people are community members, and the people who are hosting a meetup are also community members. And so I think about the people that I work with as like stakeholders and participants, not just in the end products of our entire ecosystem, but also as producers, as owners in our ecosystem as well.
No, I think it's really important also to define your community goal, right? Because if your community goal is developers, then you're missing on the end users, right? If your community goal is like the like moderators on Discord, then you're missing out on these people, right? But if the goal is, let's say, like you said, right, like Celo has a strong goal, and therefore everything could work from there, then it's like that's the community, and just there's 100 different ways to implement that community. There's 100 different ways to interact with that community, if it's a hub in person, or if it's a Discord channel, or if it's a Telegram. But as long as that goal is really stated clearly, then it's very easy to fit the pieces of the community into that one goal. So when you start losing the goals, when you start getting like screwed over.
Yeah, and there's this whole spectrum of users of your protocol. Even if you're building for one thing, anyone around the world can download it, and if they don't fit that persona, you obviously you don't count them out. So there's on one extreme there's DeFi degens, on the other extreme there's unbanked people, and a lot of times people pick kind of one or the other, but there's actually tons of overlap between the two. And you can actually build for both. They're real people. They have a mobile phone, and they like yield. I mean, there's some similarities, and so you can actually, you wouldn't say one is maybe you're a little bit more focused on one side of the spectrum or the other for your initial launch. But if you're building in a way that you ignore one or the other of those audiences, then you're potentially missing a big part of the pie with your growth. So it is good to kind of like think very holistically about it in your design. And your community is 100% global on day one. The liquidity in your tokens is global on day one. And so you should build, kind of like with a very expansive mindset. Easier said than done, because how do you simplify that down into a UI that everyone can use and benefit from? That's kind of the trickier part.
I think that's also my favorite part about working on community development, because I think community sits like at a cross section between marketing, DevRel, product, and it's like this very interdisciplinary field of community building.
Yeah, there's a big difference between, like, Evan, what you're talking about, like including community and building a product versus like what I'm focused on is more, I think I focus on education a lot. I say the pillars of DevRel for me at least are education and community. So what I really focus on is building personal relationships, but that's empowering people to build products or services in their communities. And since Celo is such a global community, I don't pretend to know what people need around the world. I don't even pretend to know what people need, like in the United States where I live. But I just ask people, I listen, I ask for what they need, I hear what they have confusions about, and I try to make things clear and just like empower them to build. So I think about creating space for community members to come. Like I just host office hours on Discord and public chat rooms like twice a week. Anybody can come and ask questions or just listen to questions. And my DMs are always open on Discord. You have to friend me first so I avoid scammers, but that's a good point. Web3 community seems to be difficult, particularly with scammers on Discord, Telegram. Like how do you filter that out? But yeah, just like empowering people, creating the space, listening to them, and then just like doing this iterative process of like listening, putting out content to help people where they are and just serving their needs. But yeah, I guess back to the point about scammers, like how do you guys deal with that in your communities? Because it's like very real. People are losing real money. Like this is a big problem across Web3. And it's hard when uneducated users come and then there's like real consequences to some of this ignorance. So curious how you guys think about it, approach it.
Sorry, I'm going to answer a different question, but it's related. I think there's scammers, but I think there's also like community members that are upset, which I think is another piece that's also related, which is like, I'm just thinking about it's like Discord, like community management, right? So yeah, like scammers, like we use a lot of bots to like delete links automatically, to like automatically delete users if they do different things. If you join our Discord within the first 24 hours, you're not allowed to post a link. So like there are a lot of tools around like the scammers part. I'm not saying they don't still get through, but I think another piece also that, I mean, I'd love to hear your guys' opinion on this, like when Ubeswap's coins in a downward spiral, right? And then all of a sudden you have someone who's a legit concern saying, hey, I lost my life savings because you guys are mismanaging your project. Or, hey, I love this project, but you guys are doing X, Y, and Z wrong. And Nomspace, when's your airdrop? You guys told us there's going to be an airdrop. We never said it. But again, it's a concern. So like, do you block them right away? Do you try to engage? Like, there is a lot, again, like any community, right? It's not a homogeneous group of people, right? If it was, then it would be kind of boring and sucky. And I think it's a lot of questions about, not just about, let's say, scammers, but also what do you deal with a heterogeneous group of people where some people are upset at your project and are upset that you're not doing what they think you should be doing. I think that's, I mean, for me, like that's a lot harder of a thing that we always struggle with, right? It's like, how often do you go back and forth with the person explaining like, hey, we're planning on doing an airdrop. It's not going to be for a while. We think it's important to have all the proper connections. We think it's important to make sure our product's in a place that we're not going to airdrop and have our coin go to 0.000 cents in the first week, right? But you say that, and then they're like, yeah, but you lied to me. And it's like, I never lied to you. But you said X, Y, and Z. I never said X, Y, and Z. But someone on Twitter who pretends to be you said, you know, and like you go back and forth. It's like, at what point do you want to stop the engagement? But I think it's also really important to say like, oh, you said one thing critical about my project. Let's ban you and delete you from our Discord or our Twitter or something like that. So I don't have a good answer. If anybody wants to become moderators for Nam, I'm here. But I think it's really a hard question to ask.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. I mean, there's all kinds of users from across the spectrum, and you know, if they're coming to Celo from another chain, you know, they don't know the mission or the project, or you know, they're just kind of asking the same question in 27 chat groups. Yeah, I mean, it's important to listen to like people with valid concerns, and we have great community moderators who do a lot of troubleshooting and hand-holding for users, you know, who are new to like yield farming. But yeah, we don't leave really any room for, you know, scammers or you know, more perhaps nefarious-minded people to like try and distract the community or you know, move us you know, off our mission. You know, there's definitely debate around governance votes, and that's nice. We love having open debate, and then we just try and, you know, kind of steer things. Like sometimes you have a very loud voice. It'll be someone with, you know, 30 ube, and they just like really can't get over this one thing about this governance proposal, and it just like sours the entire mood in your social channel. And you just kind of, I don't know, let them have it out, and it's nice to have other community members kind of like, you know, help meet that person in the middle, because it's not our job to just push through governance votes. So yeah, we've had to delay, you know, governance vote, or you know, change it a little bit. No problem. But people want to feel like they've been listened to at least. So that's important, and then you know, you can help to move things forward, because at the end of the day, like we all want to do what's best for the platform and for Web3 and for Celo, and so it's pretty easy to tell if someone's like aligned with that, and then you know, those are the people that carry everything forward.
I agree. I think to your point, I think dissent is really healthy, and listening to opinions that are different than your own, or especially than of the team, is really healthy and really important. But in terms of scams and in terms of trolls, like, yeah, I mean, I want to offer the same kind of perspective as this is, like, if you're going to get into fights with trolls, you're going to have more trolls, because where attention goes is where all of your energy goes as well. And so if you're going to focus your energy and your attention on like constantly fighting with trolls, you're going to end up attracting more trolls to your community, and it's like whack-a-mole. You're never going to win that battle. So I think, you know, I personally believe that you want to be fostering like healthy behavior, like healthy ecosystem. You want to be supporting your community members, and you want to be empowering them to take responsibility, because if you want to model and encourage the kind of behavior that you want to see in your community. And like, I really like the perspective that a community manager is less of a leader who's in the front, but it's more like a janitor who's in the back and who's just sweeping the channels so that everyone else can do the work. And so I think it's, to a point, if it's like a violation of code of conduct, I think it's one thing, and you can boot people out for that, and we don't tolerate abuse in that kind of way. But if it's like trolls or any other kinds of things, I think one of the healthiest things you can do is not give it attention and not empower it, because whatever you empower is what's going to persist in your community. And I think we're so lucky in Celo to have fostered a community that is supportive and is empowering and is like really genuinely incredibly amazing.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see how the dynamics change as the tools change. Like, a lot of discussion is happening on Discord and Twitter. I mean, these are pseudonymous systems, just like blockchain networks. There's no reputation or identity baked in, but like once we get crypto native chat tools and we can actually build like robust reputation systems for decentralized networks, this will change dynamics. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. I mean, it's not here yet. It's a hard problem to solve, but like, yeah, it's interesting to see us use these.
If you're looking for identity in crypto, there's this really cool project called Nomspace. Nom.space.
When Discord. But yeah, I mean, it's hard when people just join and create fake accounts just to like present dissenting opinions, because there's no cost to doing so, right? So we've got just a minute left. I don't know if we have a question in the audience, or if we want to wrap up. Just looks like we have one. Yeah, there's a mic coming. So.
Hey, I'm passionate about communication and strategy and storytelling, And I was really interested. I agree with what everyone's saying about the evolution obviously from Web 2 to Web 3. But I wanted to focus on the idea that, I think the metrics of how the values that are now outdated of how you look at users in Web 2, I think there are metrics that have been built around that, stickiness, engagement, number of impressions. And so I'm wondering if we all agree that Web 3 shifts the value from users being like numbers to the idea of community and building community. Is there a metric for that? Is there a way to quantify personal connection? Is there a way to understand or measure loyalty? Maybe we're looking at it wrong entirely. Maybe it's like a paradigm shift of the metric, but that's kind of the question I wanted to put out there. How do you guys know if you're doing well, and how do you scale, right? What's your proof of scale beside just a larger community? Because a larger community isn't always a fuller, richer community. So what are the metrics for building community?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just want to say something real quick. I actually had that on my list of questions, but we didn't get to it, so I'm glad you asked. My intuition is like measuring this stuff is actually, I don't want to say it's counterproductive, but it's like the wrong thing. It just feels very reductionist because you don't get the richness of the personal relationship that's built. So it's like really, I trust the people that I work with. We don't have good metrics for this, and I trust that people are doing what they think is best to build community, and kind of just like having that trust seems to work, because it's super hard to measure. There are new tools that try, but my intuition is just like it doesn't capture it. It's too reductionist. But I'd like to hear other thoughts.
Ooh, I love this question. Yeah, you said, is there a way to quantify loyalty? Is there a way to quantify love? Is there a way to quantify like, trust and all of these things? I think our work at the Celo Foundation, like growing the Celo community at the protocol level, is incredibly high touch. Like the programs that we do and the people that we work with is we really invest in like one-on-one relationships, and like people we give grants to develop community, like they become an extension of our team. They become like our team on the ground, building grassroots community. So it's so much less about numbers and it's so much more qualitative. The way that we measure impact and the way that we think about community growth is like the strength of our relationships and the strength of our community in those regions. And you can't really capture that in numbers. Of course, we have like different numbers and the ways that we like proxies that we look at in terms of community. But I think community building is an incredibly high touch work. But I'd love to hear your perspectives as well.
Yeah, so as for Ubeswap, it's, people look at Ube price. It's better metrics could be how many Ube holders are there. Maybe better metric could be how many are staking on our platform. And yeah, there's like 12 million Ube staked on our platform, and that's 30 or 40% of total circulating supply. So that was really encouraging to see, actually. But for me, and I think the whole Celo ecosystem, the best possible metric to target is developer activity, because investing in developers is by far the highest ROI of anything you could ever do. Like, who cares if you spend X dollars on marketing or you're hosting events? If you're attracting and retaining the best developers and they're building on your protocol and doing and integrating with you, then there's no question that you're going to take off one day, because you're putting the building blocks in place that will lead to greater utility and adoption of your product. So it's 100% all about developers, and I think Celo's had like some waves, like developers come and they go to other chains. You see a lot of cross-chain development activity, but definitely in the past 6 months or so, you see a lot more interest, and this conference is a reflection of that. And so I hope, especially given that everyone new to the ecosystem is wholeheartedly buying into the mission, I hope that's here to stay, because that's good for everyone.
I'll just add 30 seconds. I don't want to like contradict what you said, but I do believe in what you measure is what you pay attention to. And therefore, even if it's something really stupid, like I want to have 300 people active in my Discord this week, or I want to have 500 people following me on Twitter this week. And I'm not saying these are good goals in any way, shape, or form. I'm not saying that this is a way of measuring community. But if you say like, oh, we all trust each other, at least for myself, then that just means I end up spacing out and not doing anything. So I do think that having goals and metrics are important, not necessarily because they measure quantity of community or relationships or anything like that, but I do think it's just a great way for you yourself to focus on something, saying like, this is my goal. And yes, having 500 people speak to each other on Discord does not mean you have a 500-person Discord community. It doesn't mean you have 500 loyal users, but it does mean that you're going to spend an extra hour a day on Discord to make sure that they're engaging. And I do think that's an important piece to at least jumpstart your way of thinking about community.
Great. Yeah, great points. So we're out of time. Thank you all for joining, and thank you for the great questions.
Well, am I not supposed to clap?